Hello and welcome into another episode of the BCJ Podcast presented by our wonderful sponsors at the Holy Grail. The weather is getting great. Red season is in full swing. Make sure you head down to the Holy Grail. Get a cold beer, get something good to eat before, after, during the Reds game, or the next time you're down at the banks. Support the folks that support us by grabbing a Cincy Light. 50 cents from every Cincy Light served at the Holy Grail goes back to Cincy Reigns. So much appreciated to everyone that heads down there over the next few months as we head into football season and takes advantage of all the good offerings that they have. As you can tell, I'm not Chad Brendel. He is sick and nursing several ailments. So we brought in Wally Pipp, Keegan Nickerson, and to join us to talk football recruiting, transfer portal, all things behind the scenes, Bearcats, Zach Grant, General Manager, Cincinnati Bearcats football team. Gentlemen, how are we doing tonight?
Doing great.
I'm great. Exciting times.
Absolutely. You guys got a bunch of visits starting up in a couple days for the next several weeks. So should hopefully see this 2025 high school class continue to grow, and we will get into that specifics. Withstanding can't touch on individual players and whatnot, but can still talk about some different things about the class. But players have been back for what, 2 weeks now? Is this is the second week of summer, or was Monday probably 2 weeks, right?
Started the third week. Our guys got back on
third
the
week. Okay.
Yeah. So we're since the summer period's longer for us with this calendar, we have a couple discretionary weeks that are, by NCAA rules, not mandatory. But our guys get in there and get after it. So yeah, teams all here assembled, kind of roaring and ready to go.
Nice.
Yeah, we got 3 visit weekends coming up, and obviously excited about those. We'll get into that after, but yeah, fire away. Keegan, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Wish it could be Chad. Soon you'll look as good as him.
I wanted to say, Dave, I think Chad's Wally Pipp in that kind of reference. Like, I'm the young gun coming up. That's going for glory.
Okay. Sure.
I'm still here.
I know.
Can't talk.
Blue game, Jordan.
I haven't gone anywhere. If I have a question for Zach, I'll pop in and ask it. I can barely hear me. I know there are going to be people that this is going to be their favorite episode ever.
Oh,
because they don't have to listen to me.
Exactly. The Bearcat Brunch has a loyal following that I'm sure listens Sunday mornings because it's not you.
Yeah, Zach, we built a whole franchise on Sunday mornings that just because I'm not in it, people are like, I'm in. I love that show.
Sure, there's other reasons.
That's the main one.
I mean, Jeff and myself do some hard-hitting post-game analysis. I will say that. So hopefully we get to talk about some more wins this year. But we'll get to that in due time.
You guys have fun. I'll pop in if necessary.
Yeah. So we've had the fall, I guess what you want to call the winter. I don't know how you guys call it, winter and spring. We've had the winter portal. Now you've had the spring portal. As a whole, before we kind of break into the spring ads, did you guys go into it targeting anything specifically? Were you just looking for the best players at kind of the best positions that you would look at it from almost like a free agent? I mean, I hate using the term free agency because that's not fair to the guys, but like in that sense of like, hey, let's just add as many of the positions that we know are important, or how do you guys kind of look at the totality of it, knowing that there's 2 periods?
Yeah, it's a good question. So like entering into essentially at the end of November, like the whole portal, the whole off season itself, trying to construct a roster for the next season. From a 360-degree lens, like a overarching viewpoint. In our 85-man scholarship roster, we have, a certain number of guys per position that we'd like to carry at each spot. And that kind of lays the baseline of, from a simplistic view of what we're going to try to attain on the roster. Because if you get out of balance, then it leads to, potentially having a huge issue at a position with some injuries. But so we're balancing both that and then what is going to make like our 2 deep as competitive as possible for the next season. So I guess the most important and the first thing is, what players do we return that we can count on? And anybody on our team could theoretically gone to the portal. So we had to make sure we kept the ones that we felt like we were necessary to keep. And then from there, it's like, who do we need to sign over the, like, really we'd like to do it in the winter. Like, who do we need to sign to have as competitive as a team for the next season as possible, while also keeping in mind, like, we're not just going to sacrifice the health of the roster moving forward from year to year just for this one season. So, in the winter, we'd like to accomplish that. And then in the spring, it's kind of like, where did we end up from the winter? Like, did we, are there more needs to fill? And, this winter was a little unique because we went into it with Coach Brown as our defensive coordinator. And, we signed every single player in the winter period that we did was under the assumption we were going to be running that scheme. And then, the numbers change a little bit in terms of what you need at each level of the defense. And obviously our scheme changed. So that changes the needs a little bit in the spring. But fortunately, we had our winter conditioning period, all the player-led practices, and then team runs, and then spring practice to go evaluate the roster and see, like, all right, we're actually, we're going to play with 3 true linebackers in the field, but we actually feel pretty good that we have guys there. Jared Bartlett was a guy that was recruited at our dog position, now moved to Mike linebacker. And, we feel like he's a guy that's ready to make an immediate impact. So, that could have been a deal where a dog necessarily wouldn't move to any linebacker off the ball position. But fortunately he could. So we knew that we didn't need to necessarily scramble just because the number of linebackers on our roster model chart increased. So there's a balance a little bit, but, I think really the start of what our needs are, I hate to get long-winded, but, is roster management. I love it. The start of where our, like, figuring out what our needs are is a continuous process for like the next 2 or 3 years. So like right now, I still am looking at like the 2025 roster and be like, all right, and what do we think we'll need in the portal after this season? Because it relates to the amount of high school kids we can take right now. You don't want to take too many high school kids and then, well, we don't have anyone on our roster. We want to, like, we would be unhappy to see leave, or we wouldn't want to get rid of, or whatever. And, we want to leave some room potentially for a portal player if we feel like we need one to step right in at that spot. So the planning is a continuous process. Hopefully in years to come, after we've built some high school classes on top of each other, we're just sitting here seeing like, hey, this sophomore is ready to be all conference type player next season, and we don't need to go in the portal. And this freshman is ready to be the number 3, defensive end or whatever moving forward, rather than, oh shoot, we have 2 players at this position we can count on. We need 5 next season. We got to go get them, and then bring in high school kids as well. So my wife's going to kill me. I just took up like 12 minutes on one answer, but that's part of it right there.
Looking at the spring portal specifically, you kind of mentioned looking at rosters in 2025 and 2026. For the spring portal, is there more of an emphasis on finding guys that have 2 and 3 years of eligibility because they're a step behind guys that got here that experienced spring practice?
Yeah. I think that's definitely part of it. there's a smaller amount of time that we can really get our hands on the guys and get them up to speed, both in the development process of the weight room and learning the offense or the defense, to where we're going to truly count on them in that fall. It doesn't mean it can't happen. Like Xavier Henderson last year came from the spring portal and was a starter right away. But knowing that there's less lead time before the season, we certainly want to get, more guys with extra years so that they can make a big jump in the next year. I'll use one player, for example, that had a great spring is Jalen Hunt. He was a defensive tackle from Michigan State, and we got him in last spring window. Each portal kid comes in at a different level of readiness, and it's hard to really know because they've either done stuff with their team, or they've been in the portal and they've been away from their team, or they could be away from their team and coming in great shape or not. So like Jalen had a shoulder surgery. He came in and, missed a lot of the summer period, started to get going in fall camp, and throughout the end of the season, like he actually started playing a little bit more for us. And I knew we had a player a little better than what he showed in the fall, but it took this next spring, he had a huge spring, and he's really going to make a big contribution this year. So, that's an anecdotal kind of situation there that goes on both sides. But yeah, we'd like to build the roster with multiple year guys throughout the spring or through the spring portal, especially if we've hit our needs right in the winter, to where we're not sitting here feeling like, last year we needed to still rebuild the receiver room in the spring window, and that's not ideal. So like this winter, we felt like we did a much better job of filling our needs. So we're hitting the spring window and being like, where can we add quality players? And we probably have more spots on the 85 roster than we do necessarily like needs by position. So then it becomes like, all right, who's the best available, and who can we take that, like, we feel like adds a high level player with developmental potential to the roster.
Let's get into some of these guys that we added, or you added, in the spring, and I have them in no particular order. Just wrote down a bunch of names. So start with tight end Francis Sherman, Arkansas, Louisville. So there's obviously a staff connection to him. And, I'll just say, like, just kind of some aspects of these guys' games that when you were scouting, or, all your backgrounds, that you felt this would be a player that, whether it's a position of need or just, like you mentioned, a player that maybe we don't need that position this year, but this is a good player that we want on our roster to develop for next year. Just kind of like, your quick snippets for each guy. We'll just run through them real quick.
Yeah. Well, first I'll say we did sign him. It's a group effort. Y'all a part of it. Everyone's part of it. Bearcat Nation's all a part of it. So we did all sign them. We're all in it together. But, Sherm, we tried to get him last year. Obviously, he came from Louisville initially, then went to Arkansas, and now here. Ultimately, we missed out on him last year. He played in the SEC at Arkansas. With Peyton Singletary deciding to move on, we had a spot and a need at tight end. And a good thing, like what we really like about Sherm, is that he's an extremely tough, rugged, nasty blocker. And, he played against a lot of the guys on our team last year in the bowl game in 2022. And there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of talk going on. And, he has kind of the right mentality when it comes to, trying to finish people. That brings a nasty, tough demeanor. And as you're building out a tight end room, different people need to do different things, So obviously we got Joey Belgian, we got Joe Royer, we got two freshmen. It was hard to sit there and be like, all right, we got two, non-freshmen on the roster that are on scholarship right now, so we needed to bring in another guy, and the familiarity played a huge part of it. Coach Stepp coached him at Louisville. He'll coach him here. Excuse me. He'll coach him here now, and we know exactly what he can do. And that one was more of where, like, Peyton left. he came right in kind of like a free agency, if you will, type thing, just because he's a 1-year guy, know exactly what you're getting. And he'll enhance the tough demeanor of the team that we're trying to build out here.
Wide receiver Jamoy Mays, UT Chattanooga.
Yeah.
Pretty big 2023 season for the Mocs, for a team that's consistently in the FCS top 25. Do you guys see him as someone that can play multiple wide receiver spots?
Yeah, we do. I think, he has the ability to play multiple spots. We'll probably start him out wide. The thing we really like about Jamoy is he's not like a 6'4" guy. He's probably right around 6 foot, 5'11", but he's a thick build. He has strength to his game. He has good ability after the catch. He's a powerful runner. He has a lot of similarities in different ways to a guy I recruited at Western Kentucky, Malachi Corley, that just went in the 3rd round. From a production standpoint, he was really good. He had 1,000 yards. Thought he caught the ball well. But, we're looking to add playmakers, and, you give him the ball and he can make plays with it in his hands. And then from vetting him throughout the process from a character standpoint, a lot of teams, I think, kind of glossed over him a little. He was late in the winter process. He had some Power 5 stuff. Got overlooked a little, went to UAB in the spring. And on the surface, it's like, all right, well, the kid just, we went FCS to UAB and he's immediately leaving. Like, what are we missing? So, obviously we got to fill those blanks. And from talking to players in the portal at UAB, staff members at UAB, and different people on our staff that we trust there, that know people there, it kind of all checked out in the right way, that, we're getting a kid that left for the right reasons and was going to be an impact player for them, and wasn't just a castaway. So, but yeah, really just physical, strong player, good hands. We're going to continue to develop his route running to advance that part of his game, especially on the outside. But I think he adds some weaponry to the offense, so to speak.
How hard is it, and how much extra work goes into it when now we're seeing these guys that, like in his case, transferred in the winter portal and then are back in the portal in the spring, or they transferred, went through a season and now they're still a young guy and they're transferring again? Like, how, and the shotgun wedding style or shotgun dating style of the portal in and of itself, how hard does it make it for you guys to connect all the dots on why is this happening? Is it the kid? Is it a coaching thing? Is it just a family wants to be somewhere? Like, is that as challenging as it seems like it is from the outside?
Yeah, I think that's one of the more challenging parts of it. But it's also an opportunity really to gain an edge. If it was all just easy, then they'd all just line up and go where they're supposed to go. But, if we're able to use connections we have to gain a little extra insight, that maybe other teams aren't either willing to do or don't do, then it allows us to, gain an advantage, so to speak. It does add some extra work. Like, even a year ago at this time, if a kid had done that, he immediately gets crossed off because he'd have to sit a year unless he graduated. So, with these rule changes, it kind of opens up, well, they're still actually on the table. Now, you can use some bias and imagine all the possible reasons why a player went to a school and then immediately left, right? And if we didn't have such a high grade on him through our, scouting process from the fall, we probably wouldn't have, gone on him or done the research we did. So it starts there kind of. And, in this particular case, it's fortunate that, I recruited that kid a little bit at Western Kentucky back in 2019. I saw him at the Kennesaw camp in 2019. He's wearing purple shorts. And then in like we had Zeb Spear was on staff with these guys at UT or at Louisville, and then he was with us for like a month before he became the tight ends coach at UT Chat. So we're able to get a real insight on him, where like people we really trust talk about him and what he can do, how they used him, how they plan to use him in the future. And, for a 1-year guy, it just adds to the importance of knowing exactly what you get.
Isn't John Peterson's son on staff at UAB too?
He is, yeah. So that's another one. Like we had the connection there. A couple guys I was with at Ohio State are on staff as well, and we have great respect for what UAB does. And when they give an opinion on a guy, obviously we have to value or not value whatever somebody says. You have to scout your sources kind of too. So, but we were confident knowing those guys that they're shooting us straight. So, but yeah, to answer your question, but a little more goes into it. But really, like if there's 1,500 kids that go in the portal, it's not like we have to vet 1,500 of them. Like a bunch of them right away can't play at Cincinnati. Obviously, the standard's high, and we're trying to attain an even higher standard. So we're not just gonna, vet somebody that we don't think can play. But that's what we paid Jack the big bucks for. So get him going.
The big bucks, right?
We can stay on the offensive side of the ball and round it out with Xavier Lozowicki from Maine. And the limited stuff that's out there about him, it seems like he's a guy that beat out his competition at the end of the year and then made the most of it, posting kind of a ridiculous PFF passing grade. So do you feel like you're getting a guy that's just continually on the rise in terms of what he can provide, and kind of how do you see him contributing next year?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to put it. He's been on the rise and forced himself onto the field, kind of against initial odds, like 2 seasons in a row, really. Dating back to high school at IMG Academy, he's behind a highly rated player, and throughout the course of the season ends up taking his job. And then, the way high school recruiting goes nowadays, like by that time for a lot of teams, the hay is in the barn. And, Maine did a great job, obviously, of scouting him and finding him. And so they got him. And, he played the last 5 games of the season. And so that kind of suggests that they weren't planning on playing him, but he forced himself on the field again. And we thought the tape was really good. Like, for one, he's a really big body, all of 6'5", 310, 315 pounds. He's got a good frame where we can reshape it in Coach Palizzetti's Nico's program and even improve like the quickness that we saw on tape that was evident. And, he thought he played to the whistle, showed nastiness. He's playing FCS competition. So there'll be a step up in competition, but I don't necessarily like hold that against guys all the time either. Like when he's producing good tape, showing the right physical traits against like whoever it is. And, some of the guys he was going against are really good players too, and getting recruited by, Power 5 teams when they go in the portal. So, yeah, we're fired up to get him. Obviously, you look on the offers he posted on Twitter and everything. We battled some big boys, and I think that really comes down to a testament to, Coach Cardwell recruiting him really hard from the beginning. Like the second he went in the portal, we were on him right away, like immediately. And obviously that trickles down to where like, Jack did a great job identifying that we liked him a long time ago too. And not to give the secret sauce away a little bit, like we were trying to find a player that had multiple years. We didn't care if he played in 12 games or 5 games. We were hoping a guy playing in 5 games would be under the radar a little bit, But obviously cream rises to the crop, and a lot of other teams saw that he was good too. But, I do think he's a guy that's continuously getting better, and he'll continue to do it. He's got the right demeanor, which is huge for us on the offensive line. He's another guy willing to come in and compete. We return, all 5 starters and another one that played a lot last year. And, everyone's going to compete in that room. And it kind of builds, positive competition where they're all kind of making each other better too. There's no animosity or anything, but yeah, we're fired up about Xavier.
Is he a tackle, or is that to be determined?
Yeah, he's a tackle. Yep.
Can't have too many of those.
No, we'd like to stockpile them. They're hard to find, especially ones with years. I mean, we get to have our hands on them. A lot of people talk about how they can transfer at any time. Well, it's a heck of a lot easier when we're doing the right things in our program to keep guys than go out and find them, especially when we know exactly who they are and what they are once they're in our program.
Move over to the defensive line, and a couple guys at tackle. Cam Rutherford from Arkansas Pine Bluff. Let's start there. Sounds like he's gone through quite a body transformation from his high school days, and so might just be starting in on the path as on the defensive side. What did you guys like about what you saw from him so far?
Yeah, upside. I think that's the biggest word for Cam. There's a whole bunch of upside. So, like, a little insight on his path, like you mentioned, he was an offensive lineman in high school up at MLK in Detroit. Obviously, it's been really good to this program. And he goes down to Arkansas Pine Bluff, and he started out as an offensive lineman last season, or 2022, like his freshman season, redshirted, and he made the transition over to defensive line this year. And honestly, his body changed a little, even from like what we saw on tape to when we saw him on campus. Like, he leaned out even a little after that. It seems like a kind of a similar comparison in body type. He's a little bigger, but like to Eric Phillips, where he, when he got here, he was much heavier, slimmed down, and then kind of put it back on a little bit in a positive way. So Cam's already started that process. But, watching the film, a guy that's playing his first season at defensive line really flashed some high-level plays. As expected, there's some inconsistency there, which is why we're good, because he's got 3 years. So, like, in a situation like that, a 1-year guy with all inconsistency on tape, you'd think a little differently with it. But a 3-year player, we're confident that our staff can ooze that upside out of him. The other thing, the D line, going back to your roster management question, we got 4 who we think are really good players with either 1 year left or likely their last year, potentially their last year, all included. So we need to build that up both for next year and the future at the same time, kind of. So we accomplished that, I feel, with Cam. And, I know that the Bearcat Journal fans and everything understand, like, college football in the deepest parts because they're on the message boards and stuff. So, like, the market for defensive linemen in the transfer portal this spring was extremely competitive. And I mean, I think, like, you saw some of the national reporters writing articles about it before the portal even happened. So, like, we knew teams would be desperate for him. So we were extremely excited to get him, and it's such a competitive market too. So Cam's got a whole bunch of upside.
The other guy, defensive line, Harris Adams from Southeast Missouri State. I had someone tell me to watch the Kansas State game, so I turned that on, and they did a lot of rotating their defensive line, which I think that was their strongest position group defensively. But he certainly stood out, and in no way looked overmatched by Cowboys' third-round pick, Cooper Beebe, and Kansas State center. He was consistently in the backfield doing a lot of disruptive things. So have to be pretty excited about getting him on board.
Yeah. Harris was another big one for us. I mean, first of all, he's a really big human being. And, as we evaluate the roster, moving to this new scheme, and then, we lost a defensive tackle that, was 300 plus pounds. So, we're kind of at a deficit of physically players that are 300 plus. You know, we got Jalen Hunt, we got Dante, and then we got a couple freshmen coming in. So it was of the utmost importance to fortify that part of the team. You know, if you're not good up the middle, bad things happen. You know, I'm not a coach, so I can't speak to why SEMO rotated him more. Based on the snaps I watched him play, I would have had him in the whole game. But, you know, to see him against Big 12 competition doing what he did against Kansas State was really encouraging. You know, one thing we identified through last year was the need to get bigger, especially against certain teams we play. You know, I mean, Kansas State being one of them. They're a big team. They're going to have a quarterback that likes to run the ball next year. You know, UCF, big team. We have another quarterback that's big. You know, kind of the list goes on. There's a lot of teams that are big. So adding a big body that showed the ability to play really well with like elite strength, I'd say probably at the point of attack, was huge. So, you know, him and Cam are different too. They're different body types. They could play different positions. They could play the same position. Until we know and they're here, we know a little bit, but it's hard to know for sure. So, you know, Harris has 2 years left. So again, we accomplished that goal of helping this season and the next. You know, as we fill like a couple holes in the amount of players on the roster at defensive line in the junior, sophomore, and freshman class. So, or redshirt, like second year coming up class.
Moving back through the defense, Jake Golday from Central Arkansas, kind of an under the radar guy, but just someone who, just looking at his measurables at that linebacker position, as someone who looks like they can make an impact right away.
Yeah, it's hard to put into words how big that get was. I mean, Jake Goldie's a really good player. You know, we fortunately, you know, it's funny how some of this stuff works. Like you look up and like, did Feral Portal or like 247 or somebody tweet out that the kid get in the portal or not? And like for him, they didn't. So like a lot of teams that do it a little different than us probably didn't even know he was in there. But he had, I think, like 55 tackles the last 5 games of the season. Really long. He's 6'4", but he's also long dimensionally. He's got long arms. He's physically in really good shape. Like he looks the part. You know, I'd probably compare his body to Dingle a little bit. He's probably a little taller, a little leaner, but he runs really well and he's dedicated. You know, when our coaches are on the road, you know, he's up there with our GAs and he's in there getting as much film as possible in every single day to learn the defense at a rapid pace. So, you know, I think he's probably one of the best linebackers in the portal for the entire cycle. We certainly had him graded that way. So we're fired up to have him. And, you know, I think, again, it's another guy that adds really like competitiveness to the roster. It's obviously not going to be given to him. He's got to earn it, little guys in the spring. And I know he knows this based on the way he's been working when he got here. And we told him this up front. These guys have a head up or jump start on you. But you got to go try to take it. Historically, Coach Veit has rotated a lot of linebackers. So we can't just go into the season with, you know, 3 or 4 guys we feel comfortable with. So we're glad to get another one in there that we do to put on the field and play really good football for us. And then again, another bonus, he's got 2 years left. So, yeah, and I'm kind of sensing a trend with some of these kids too. Like, but in his case, his senior year of high school was during COVID. So we always kind of look back and are like, all right, well, we love this kid on tape and we're taking him out of the portal. He's obviously earned the right to be on our roster this year as a junior. So like, how do we find that player in high school that we're willing to like really want to be on the roster 3 years from now? What did he look like? So we like go back and watch all their high school tapes, and, you know, his high school tape was really good. Like, I mean, he was playing tight end. He's really long. Like he's listed at 6'6", which seems crazy for off the ball backer, but obviously he's like 6'4", typical high school embellishment. But yeah, I mean, I would have recruited him out of high school. Like I did a poor job for the Hilltoppers, I guess, on that one. But, you know, part of that was COVID too. Like, why did Memphis not go after him? Why did XYZ team, and you kind of understand the process of how he got to where he was. And it's been the same for a few of these kids, which is interesting to see. But he's a total stud.
We have, I guess, is it safety, defensive back? Do we not know? With Trey Gola Collard from Southern Utah.
Yeah, Trey will be a safety for us. In the 3 safety defense Coach Veit has implemented here, we'll see which of the 2 really he'll play, of free or strong. But Trey was another really productive player for Southern Utah. And prior to that, he was at University of Mary, maybe. He was at a D2 school in one of the Dakotas.
North Dakota.
Yeah. And, again, another kid, like, how did he end up there? And you can look at the why, and it all kind of checked out and made sense. And then everyone we talked to also, had like amazing things to say about him from a character standpoint and football character and all that. So we had Jaden Davis leave after the spring. So, we had a spot open at safety, and we just signed, it's probably unprecedented, but we signed like 5 portal safeties. And you got a lot of
DBs in this 2024 freshman class too.
Yeah. So like we signed a lot in the winter. We expect them all to play. We got to have a kid with years left, which he has, willing to compete with these guys, which a lot of people will back down from. So that's a testament to Trey, and then who we like on tape. So like in the portal, you kind of have to make a decision there. Like, are you going to take a guy who hasn't played at a school and bank on his upside? Those guys a lot of times are hard to find positive character reports on. And safety is one of the positions that doesn't go in the portal a whole lot. So like we were able to find a guy that played really good football. We thought we had him graded out high through the fall when we graded all these guys, and we really liked him. And from day one, we kind of, got on him, and, he's a West Coast kid, so it's kind of hard to know if he was willing to come to Eastern time zone, and he was. And since he's gotten here, he's been really good. He's an instinctive tackler, instinctive in coverage, good athlete, really hard worker. He can communicate on the back end. He'll be definitely a guy that enhances our team.
And then we have punter Max Fletcher. Our fans are going to be more familiar with him than probably any fans outside of Arkansas fans. It seems from the outside pretty obvious why this move was made. Were you guys actively seeking this out, or did he just was like, I want to play with my brother for 1 year before he goes, and I'm cool redshirting and then taking over from there?
Yeah, it's probably more of the latter. Like, it's atypical to have 2 scholarship punters on the roster at the same time. But where we were coming out of the spring, and when I spoke earlier about like what we felt like our needs were, and then how much room we had in the 85, we felt good about where we're at positionally coming out of spring. So like we had some room to take best available, right? And it happens certain ways. Like, obviously the kid wants to come here to be with his brother. I think it's a really cool situation. Like, you think about it, they grow up in Australia, and then at different times they come to the United States. First of all, they're thousands of miles away from their family, and then they're away from each other. But like, you get to come to a new country and experience this together for a year. Like, that's pretty awesome. But like, the reason we took him is like, we have an NFL punter. Like, it's rare to get, we have one, and then now we have another. Like, it's rare to get an NFL player out of the portal. Like, I think the numbers in recent years start to back that up. So like, I feel like we got one with him. He's an elite punter. And he's got 2 years after this. So you either take him now when we felt like we had room, so we did, or we're out there on the hunt next year, hoping we get a guy that good rather than knowing we have one. So we'd always rather to go the for sure way than the hope it happens way.
Right. Looking at the group as a whole, the winter guys, the spring guys, I know it's only been spring practice for the winter guys, so assessing their potential to contribute this year is still probably a little bit difficult. But just from a scouting staff standpoint, a general manager, Jack's position, the other guys that go into the portal, I'm not going to say give yourself a grade, but like, how do you assess where you started to where you finished? Or, do you feel like you met 75, 80, 90% of what you were trying to accomplish? Were there still some things that kind of gnaw at you a little bit, or just kind of like when you guys look back and do self-scouting, because I'm sure just as coaches do self-scouting of games, you guys do self-scouting of, we didn't offer this guy, we probably should have, or we didn't go hard enough after this guy, we probably should. Like, how do you guys look, or is it too soon to kind of look back at this class? Is that more so you're doing that for your first year's class?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll answer a couple ones there. Like, first of all, we're gonna scout our roster through the like fall camp. In like the recruiting office, it's a dead period. High school games haven't started yet, so like it's actually a really good opportunity to do that. So we're gonna do that as a group, and give them grades. Like, I forget what time I was on here, but the last time I was on here, I was talking about how like our grading system relates to like what they are as a Big 12 contributor, starter, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to give that to our whole team in fall camp. It's hard to put a grade on how we did. Like, I'll probably tell Jack he did like a C just to like make sure he stays motivated.
Just to annoy him.
Get him. Yeah, for sure. But honestly, like, I know it's not the answer you want, but like the results we have on the field will ultimately show what the grade is.
Sure.
Like, that's the beauty about football. I love the game because it is a meritocracy. Like, in the end, everyone can talk about how good the class was and this and that and how good the teams are in the offseason. The games will show. And like the guys we took, you'll be able to see these 26 guys. How did they do it in their Bearcat career? So ultimately, like, that's how I'd love to judge it. It does stink because in recruiting, like, it takes so long sometimes to really show whether there's results or not. I am pleased though with the fact that, we ended up signing 47 new players after the season, like between the high school guys, obviously majority of them were committed already. And then all the portal guys. And that's, I should be better at math, but that's probably 60+% of our scholarship roster. And to flip it in 1 year and be confident with where we are as a football team, I think, is a testament to our staff and, the coaches and Coach Sad and then our recruiting staff and, busting their tail to get it done. It's not like we can sit here and feel sorry for ourselves. Like, Cincinnati is a winning program. There's a lot to offer. And, we have the season we did last year, and then we kind of blow it up after the season to kind of make the roster what we envision it. And I can't lie to you. I felt like we had the right process in place, but to execute it, there's a little nervousness sitting there after the Kansas game. And, we get whooped, and then we know what we're about to do. And it's just like, all right, well, time to go execute it. So, yeah, I'm happy with where we are. There's always room for improvement. Like, say we have the best season we possibly can, we better improve the next year, So like you can always get better, and we always need to get better. So, but yeah, I'm happy with it. But yeah, we'll eval the roster this fall camp, give those grades, and then throughout the fall continuously evaluate it based on the performance of the guys, and which will then lead to what the needs become for the next season in that winter period.
I'm curious how much of that goes on in the spring, where I know you guys are out there a little bit watching spring ball, but you're recruiting,
Yeah.
a lot as well. Do you watch tape? Do you kind of look back at those guys in the spring and say, all right, we think this one worked? And then just so I don't have to stay on here and ask another question, how happy were you with the high school guys? Because it felt like a lot of those high school guys flashed consistently.
Yeah. To your first question, we do that in the spring. Like anytime we're out there, we're either just going to twiddle our thumbs or actually try to do something productive. So like we're going to evaluate the guys on our roster at all times. But in the spring, the difference between fall camp and spring, like literally in fall camp, we're going to sit down as a recruiting staff and then present it to Coach Sat. Like literally, these are the grades we gave the players on the roster. This spring, it's like, how is this newcomer we got? Or how is a guy like we talked about before, Jalen Hunt, how is he improving? And then it's like, who can we count on coming out of the spring? Relative to that, what are the needs in the spring portal to fix it for the season? So like we're evaluating it in that lens. And then it's like, how do these high school kids look? What's their hope for development in the future? And, this guy looks this way and it's different than tape. So let's go back in his high school tape and try to figure out why like it looks different when we got him, Again, it's always the continuous improvement and self-scouting, which you always have to do in football because the game continuously changes. So if you have that mindset, if you don't have that mindset, I think you're in trouble. But to the second question, I thought the high school class was awesome. Like I've 10 of them are here so far. 11 more get here in this weekend. Yeah, Monday. So we'll get the rest of those guys here. But through the guys that were here already, like we're extremely impressed with them. And it's a testament to those guys' work ethic upon getting here, and then our staff getting around them and making them able to be implemented in all our team stuff right away. There's different types of high school players. Some are more ready to play than others when they get there. Some have higher upside than others. And like we recognize that on these guys. And, you see, for example, a kid like Gavin Grover, the way his body's constructed, he's so long, but he has really good receiving skills. But a kid like that's going to have to grow into his body, and he knows it too. So whereas you get a guy like Jaquan Sanks who comes in here and then coming from the program he did, that's like a perennial state champion, you kind of figured he'd probably be more ready to play. But it still doesn't change the fact we're incredibly impressed by his business-like approach and the way he goes to work and, the physical demeanor against, college kids when he should be in high school. So, really happy with that class so far. Excited to open those new presents, so to speak, when they get here and we get to see them work out and get closer look at them. Carter Wilson, I thought, did a great job evaluating those high school guys, and some guys he's higher on than others, and it's like you go back and forth, and then you get to all see it. So no, I'm fired up with the high school class, and then obviously everyone else in the recruiting department did a phenomenal job putting that together. Cass, Caroline, Ashley, and everyone. So
we'll spin it then to this upcoming 2025 class with visits starting this weekend. Kind of take us through a little bit of the, we have a fairly good idea. They come in, they stay at a hotel, they go out to dinner, but like, what are, in your opinion, as the GM and kind of the head of the recruiting staff, when these official visits happen, what are some of the behind the scene things that you feel are most important, that you're like, this is my top list that I want to impart on these guys that we're trying to get to become Bearcats?
Yeah, it's a great question. Me personally, like on the day-to-day with these visits, like a lot of times I'm concerned about making sure Coach Sat is seeing everybody that he needs to see, in each event that we do, and like helping guide his time. So like I feel like sometimes like when you're the head coach, every recruit wants to talk to you kind of at all times, and the families too. So like I try to help manage like, hey, here we need to make sure you talk to him, and then like let's get over here and talk to them. And I keep kind of a checklist. Like the last thing we ever want to happen is like we go through all of Friday on the OV and coach hasn't had the chance to sit with or talk to this family. You know what I mean? So I focus a lot on that. And then the general procedure of the whole thing, obviously we have a staff that, headed up by Caroline and Ashley to make sure this stuff runs smoothly, but we just want it can be hectic with the behind the scenes stuff from the recruiting department to the coaches on where to be, what to do, where we're going and all that. Like obviously there's a plan, and then like we could be running behind schedule or whatever. In the end, it needs to look right to the recruits. Like they need to look like as if it was, oh, that's exactly how it should have happened. Like, Coach Veit takes 45 minutes instead of 30 in his position meeting. Well, a coach taking 15 extra minutes in a position meeting ain't the end of the world. Like, and, Caroline will be like, we need to be on schedule. And I'm like, well, I'm fine with the DC spending 15 extra minutes with a kid, like, so we can just adjust this way, and all that craziness that we're trying to adjust the schedule with in the back end to make sure it flows right. As long as the recruit walks into the next thing and they're ready to go and he's having a good time on that, that's all. That's all that matters, I do think like the official visits are just a culmination of kind of like everything that we've done through the whole process with these kids. Like we're not going to be doing a whole lot different than what we did with them on unofficial visits, especially the ones that have been here like multiple times. Like kid's been here like 4 or 5 times. He's probably seen everything in total in each of those visits in different ways. But now he gets to see it all again in different ways, in more detail. And then he gets to spend more time around the players. I think that's another big thing. Like they spend the night here so they can get around our guys. They get a feel for the players. A lot of times they have relationships going in with them where we've, our players have gotten connected to them through social media. So that's another big thing. And then, there's more time at night we can spend with the parents, just getting to know them. Like these relationships have been cultivated over a number of months. So like, it's not like they get, all right, we're getting this kid on campus one time, we better knock it out of the park. It's like, it's just a culmination of the relationship. And ultimately it's fun. And like, I think our staff enjoys it because we have built relationships with these kids. Like it's not awkward. We're not like, oh, nice to meet you. Who are you? Like, it's like, we've been talking to you guys forever. So like, great to see you. Let's kick back and have a good time and, learn about Cincinnati. So, that I think is really the key on the official visits. That's how I feel about ours. It's not always that way. I think had the communication with these guys not been the way it is, you wouldn't feel that way. Cass does a fantastic job of continuously driving communication with these players, both through himself, the people in the recruiting office, and most importantly through the coaches and then Coach Satterfield. Like it's constant, and we're hitting them from all different angles. So I think that all helps.
You brought something up that I wanted to dive deeper into. Taking like we'll just say a local kid who came to 2 games last year, came to junior day, came to spring ball, has just been around the program 4, 5, 6 different occasions versus a kid from Florida who's been here once or twice, but you've certainly been recruiting and developing the rest of. Do you cater the visits around those things to where we're trying not to, bore the kid that has been here so much and try to give him new conversations or new people to meet? Or is that because you also brought up like making sure the timing and everything works, and if you have too many kids, I imagine that becomes even harder. Like if you have a big recruiting weekend, that becomes harder to do because everybody again wants to talk to Coach Sad or talk to Coach Veit or whoever. Do you do that, or is it just kind of like the time is the time and we kind of have to have everybody do the same thing, even though this one kid or two kids have maybe kind of seen all this already?
Yeah. So they're all on like individual itineraries. It's based on the same general thing that like the group is doing. Like if we're going to go to a lunch and like an event at a certain place, like obviously they're going to all be there together. And then when we're back at the facility, there's certain times they're doing different things on their own schedules, kind of. So it's a mix of both. Like we always cater to each individual recruit. Like there's a conscientious effort. Like what has he seen? What does he need to see? Like by the end of his recruiting process, he better have seen everything. Because the last thing we want is a player to like take 2 or 3 OVs and then sit down and decide. And it doesn't always happen like that. Like you think of it sometimes as like, all right, they're going to take their 1, 2, 3 OVs and then sit down as a family and decide where they go to school based on the criteria. Like not all families are like that. They might just say, oh shoot, they're taking 2 at my position. They already have 1. I like this place. I need to get in the boat. But not to get off subject, like we're constantly catering. So like, we don't want them to be like, oh, well, I didn't see the academic presentation. I never saw that. I've been to campus 3 times. I never saw that. Like it's always intentional. Like if we know a kid is coming back, like, and we know the players that will be able to get here multiple times, especially based on when we start recruiting them. If they come to camp, like tomorrow we got a camp. So like if they're at camp tomorrow and we really like them at camp, they're going to meet with a coach probably after. Then like, if it's a player we're deciding we're actually seriously going to pursue, we offer, we'll have an event like right before fall camp in that little window where it's live, and like we'll invite them there. And if it's a kid within like an hour, we expect them to be at that event. Then they'll get a whole new amount of things to see there. Then a game during the season. There's only so many things we can do with the team during a game because the coaches are coaching the game, and before the game they're with our players and all that stuff. So, but they'll get the game day atmosphere, which is incredibly valuable. And then like any winter event we have, like we had a couple elite junior days last year, we try to mimic those as if they're official visits. In our mind, most of the players that we have built relationships with for that long are nearing decision mode. So if your decision is on that timeline, we don't want to save everything for the OV and not shoot our shot. And then another team comes in and they did everything on their unofficial visit. And then that kid decides to go there because they've seen more. So like, we'll try to mimic it there. But then like, if they come back for spring practice, just like using an example of a kid that comes here all the time, they come back for spring practice. Well, now they've seen spring practice, which is different than everything else they've seen throughout the cycle. And then on the official visit, they may have seen a lot of what they're seeing again. Like, but it's all different because it's in an OV, and then they're also going to dinner with the staff, and then they're seeing the players. And, by that time, if you're a player who has seen all that and the boxes are all checked and you're looking for something else at another school, or like some paparazzi and lights and glitz and glam and all that, like, I don't know if you have the right mentality to play football, period. And especially for us, like, you won't survive. If you're more interested in the recruiting process than the process of becoming the best version of yourself as a football player, like at a certain point, we're just going to stop recruiting you. And that is one huge thing that happens in the recruiting process, especially to the kids that get recruited early. They get caught up more in the process and they stop being good at football. There's certainly elite players that have like such high-end height, weight, speed that it doesn't matter. But there's like 50 of those kids in the whole country. I think that is, from my experiences, that's one thing where like a lot of times, a lot of staffs will like a kid as a sophomore, and then that's the evaluation, it's over. And no matter what they do for the next 2 years, that kid's number one on our board. Like, we are constantly evaluating the players like at all times, from an athletic, how their body's changing, and specifically a personality standpoint. Like, think about the way a team can gain an advantage right now with the portal era and NIL, which is changing. Like, NIL ain't gonna be a thing in a couple of years. Like, we'll adjust to that too. But like, in this era where you can just leave, or you can want NIL more than being a player or whatever, if you don't have the right mentality, like, you're not going to develop. And when it gets hard, if you don't have the mentality to continuously become the best you can be, you're going to have a tough time, like, sticking to it and coming out on the other side. So as it relates to the recruiting process, like, it doesn't mean a kid's been here like 8 times is that type of player. Like they can certainly, like, and we're recruiting several players that have been here a ton, and we love them. That's why we're continuously recruiting them. Like, we felt that even the slightest bit that they weren't, we'd address it with them. If their actions didn't change, or if we saw tape on the field that showed that they weren't getting better, then done. But like, there's a fine line there. So like, to answer your question, yeah, we really, really, really care about it. Like, everything we do, especially for those guys, is intentional. Not to talk for an hour straight, but I will continue. Like, if we, because there's another part of your question too. Like, if we have a player who we know can probably only come here once, and then an OV, that one visit on an unofficial, we have to show them everything, because we might not get them back for an official visit if we don't. Whereas a kid that's, is going to be here multiple times, we'll definitely have the opportunity to show them different things at different points. So there's a certain balance that we kind of toe the line there with. But it's just based on the relationship we have with the kid, what they want to see, how much time they have, where we are in the recruiting process, so on and so forth.
Looking, like, kind of getting back to the visits thing, and this is just kind of a procedural question, but I'm curious of how you actually came up with the visit plan itself, like stage by stage, where you're eating. Obviously, the meeting with the coaches, going over tape, talking about fit, that's the same everywhere. But in terms of like showing off the campus, showing off what you guys have to offer that's different, is that something that was trial and error for you guys? Did you talk to players on the roster and just what worked with them? Or is it something that you kind of brought from Western Kentucky?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's kind of all encompassing, like, where we get the ideas from. I think that's part of the advantages of having like a diverse recruiting office, both, with male, female, black, white, like, age and background. So like, we all have different experiences that we've gathered in recruiting, and what have we done and what have we seen had success. And based on, what we all believe, we'll come up with an idea of like, this should be the itinerary. This is when we show them what, I do think the visits mirror each other from school to school, because there's so many people. It's a small world. There's so many people that know each other in this industry. So like, I'm sure there's influence from Ohio State in our visits because of what we did there. And then there's obviously influence from Louisville, because that's what, our head coach ultimately is used to. And it really comes down to what he wants to do at the end of the day. Like, we'll present the itinerary, look at it, make changes, go from there. But bringing up the players is a great point. Like, so our early enrollees and then the guys we signed, we polled them, after their recruiting process with us, and kind of, what specifically on the OV did you like? Did you dislike? What part of our communication did you like? And these guys are going to like more than they dislike because they came here, right? But like, there's certainly things on the OV that they came back and kind of reported back negatively that we thought about, like, what way can we change that? Like, different venue to use for a different meal, or, whatever. But then that might be one player's taste versus another. Like, this guy's a high energy kid, and he would like to, go to Top Golf the whole visit versus like this guy just like wants to watch tape the whole time. So like, it varies. Ultimately, again, it comes down to relationships, the fit, like that meeting that you say everybody does with the coach, like it does matter because that person's going to coach you. So like how much, like how, not like insight, but like how good a relationship you have with them, how comfortable the players feel with that coach, and are you giving a good presentation? So that matters a whole lot. And then from there, I mean, like, it's just case by case on how hard you push the players based on what we feel like their recruiting scenario is, I guess. But yeah, a lot goes into it. It's a great question, and we're kind of constantly evolving to change different things of the OV. But I do think most teams will probably follow a similar format where there's certain things you need to knock out and they need to see on an OV. There's a set amount of time you can fit it in. We're not the program that's going to like waste the money to do some like glitzy glammy stuff that doesn't have substance, because that sends a message to the recruits in the wrong manner. Like if you're a recruit that likes, if you want me to dress up in a Bearcat costume and dance around at the front of the facility, and that's going to make you want to go to Cincinnati, you're the wrong type of recruit. You don't care about football. So if we're going to do that, and that's how we're trying to attract recruits, over time, the mentality of the players on the team will be, why aren't they dancing around for me? Rather than, why isn't this guy coaching the crap out of me to make me the best player possible? So like, especially in today's world, that matters. So we will be we're going to roll out the red carpet. We're going to be like the Ritz-Carlton of customer service, but we're not going to be like jumping around in a costume like some teams do.
So you don't foresee Coach Satterfield like with this 360 camera dancing with a tight recruit anytime soon?
No, probably not. I did see Coach Kelly did seem uncomfortable in that.
No, he actually seemed really comfortable, which is what made it weird.
I spent time around him, and I have nothing but good things to say about
I don't know if Zach knows this, but that player was committed here.
Yeah.
Then committed to LSU and ended up signing with Alabama. So it's all kind of funny. But how much on these visits? I mean, I know there are some metro universities playing at the P4 level. It seems like, at least in my mind, the number might be closer than I think. But it seems like a lot of schools are in just, essentially college towns. How much of your guys' presentation and conversation with the recruits is about the city of Cincinnati and everything that comes along with that they maybe have never had the chance to experience and wouldn't experience at some of the other places that are recruiting them?
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. For one, they need to be comfortable with the city. Like, that's the reality. We're in a city. So, like, we're not going to take them out to, like, Alexandria, Kentucky and tell them this is Cincinnati, right? So, like, we are who we are. And, I think the good thing is, like, our staff really likes being here. So, like, the way we talk about Cincinnati is positive with the recruits, and they feel that energy and feel that positivity. And therefore, like, they will therefore feed off that energy about the city. But for the official visit, like, it's a fine line. How much do you have them out in the city versus have them on the campus? Because you don't want to just neglect the fact that, we have a campus too, and we have these facilities around us. Now, I do think we're in a unique situation. The indoor and our new facilities being built. So there's not much of a facility tour we're doing with these kids, to say the least. So, like, we do have the ability to be more around the city. We want to show them different parts about it, like show them the banks. Like, we go downtown, we can head up to like Montgomery or Marymount or whatever. Like, we've done a lot of different things, but they're always going to be around the city, because I think that makes Cincinnati like it makes the university what it is the city. And we are one of the unique places that are almost pretty much smack dab in it. So it's a mix of both on the visits, but and then some kids we recruit, like ultimately they're going to have to like the city to come here. Like, it's not to say every kid we're recruiting is from the city. Like, certainly we're going after some kids that from rural areas. But a lot of kids from rural areas want to go to the city. Like, they desire to get out. Other kids are a little like passive about it. It just depends who you are. And typically, we'll weed that out through the recruiting process, and going into it, we kind of know what this kid's like and what he likes and what he wants to be around. And we'll kind of tailor the way we're presenting it to him based on that. But ultimately, if they want to go to college with like 6,000 people in the town, it'll be tough to have them come to Cincinnati.
Yeah. You obviously can't get into specific players, but just talking about the 2025 class as a whole and looking at your roster, what are some of the positions that you feel the class as a whole is high level in, and does that fit with how you guys are, always evaluating the roster and kind of looking to the future of where we would need players? Because I imagine it's a fine balance of we see a need here, but we don't think that position is to the level that we want it to be. Do we reach because we need, or do we hold off because we have the portal opportunities? Like, how do you guys balance all that, and how does the 2025 class specifically look when you look at your rosters?
Yeah, answer one part of it first. Like, we're never going to reach on a player necessarily. Like, people have different opinions of what like reach is like, but like, so at this stage in the recruiting process, we are only OVing the kids we have on like the top of our board. Like, the kids that we are no doubters, we have no like qualms about taking them. We will only take those guys right now. And if that means like we want to sign I'll use a specific example. We want to sign a big offensive line class this year because we lose a lot of offensive linemen this season. We want to replenish that with freshmen, fill the holes in the portal as needed after the season, right? So we're not going to go down and reach for an offensive lineman we don't like just because the board looks a little thin right now. We have actually a plentiful board, in my opinion, at offensive line that we like. But if we miss on those kids, we're not going to plan B. Like, plan A is going to be found in the season. And offensive line happens to be like a perfect example of this, because that is one where guys grow so much throughout their high school career and they develop late, and we're like extremely confident we'll be able to find a player that's going to be really good for us on senior tape. That doesn't mean like it's funny, like every staff I've been with has like a negative perception of like what a senior evaluation is. I think it's like a total positive. Like, we have by not signing every kid at that position in the summer, by not going to plan B in the summer, we are granted the opportunity to find a player that's better than what plan B would be. And it could be a player that was like Zach Clark last year, offensive lineman who's coming here in a couple of days. He was like 220 pounds as a junior tape. He was stiff as a junior, but then he ended up coming to camp at like 260. And then he played his senior season at like 270. And the weight actually made his body change to where he wasn't so like tightly wound. He gained flexibility, which is rare. And the senior tape was really good. So was the camp. There's so many examples of that. And they're not even like identified at this stage in the game. Like, we are going to literally go back and watch every single kid and evaluate them based on how they're playing as a senior. And we certainly have a list of guys that, based on their body type, that we'll immediately look at in the first couple of weeks, and then we'll build it throughout the season and find the ones we want. So that first part of the question, yeah, like it's all plan A at this point. Like, we're never going to feel like we need to take somebody. And there's so many different like periods in the recruiting process where we should always be getting plan A, right? That's not to say we're going to bat 100% on this OV period. Like, we're going to OV 35 kids roughly 35 kids the next 3 weeks. Obviously, built into that strategy is the fact we're not batting 100 because we're not going to sign 35. So, yeah. The other part of the question, like in terms of what we need and where we feel good about like the class as a whole, like I said, we're going to sign a big offensive line class. We're going to sign a big linebacker class. A lot of that is because we went from like 7 or 8 linebackers on the scholarship model to 11 in the new defense. So like there's going to be more guys, and we don't want to sign so many transfers at once who aren't necessarily all going to play. You'd like to sign a transfer to have them play. So like we got to build that number up through high school. So we'll sign a big linebacker class. Always try to sign a big defensive line class. The big people are the hardest to find. So that's kind of where we'll build it out. And I do feel good about like the players we have coming in, the board we have built. And just from the standpoint of length, when I say length, like we care about height, but it is secondary to arm length and wingspan. So like we're looking for length that matters on the field. Based on our studies of like Big 12 players drafted and like the NFL draft and stuff, like the wingspan in relation to the height and then arm length is like more of a predictive measure than height itself to become an NFL player. Not to get too nerdy, but anyway, so we're going to look at the length. And I do think the players we have coming on campus, that piece of it certainly is a little enhanced from the 24 class. I think we ended up doing a really good job in the 24 class, but I've said it a number of times, we were scrambling because we were late to the game, in my mind, starting kind of in January with that class. And if I will, I'll spend like 2 or 3 minutes explaining why we were late. Obviously, we got here late, but like our process is a little different than most teams. We're building the list of 2026 players we're evaluating currently. And then we're trying to evaluate like literally every single kid that could be a FBS or FCS scholarship or FBS, like group of 5, power 5, whatever player. And then like for the local kids in Ohio, it'll include FCS, but in that 26 class, and we'll make the cut-ups throughout the season and we'll watch them week by week, like probably 400 or 500 players a week. And then we'll rotate them. So like to get 2,000 players watched, you have to go out 500. This kid stinks. We can throw him out. Like this kid's good. He's now on the next list. And like, he is continually being cut. So like we have game tape from the whole season on him. But anyway, how that process works, we are making the grades on the players throughout the fall. A lot of times teams are reactive to it as it happens in the spring. Like we can change what we think of a player in the spring based on like, all right, well, in the fall, he looked like this. He did a camp. His body's changed a little bit. Let's go back and look at the tape. How does it relate? Let's get him on campus. How big is he? How big was he back then? Et cetera, et cetera. So like when I say we're behind in the 24 class, we didn't have the ability to do that all throughout the season and come out of it with a big board of players. So we had to start that whole process from scratch. And we were a little more reactive in terms of like, all right, coaches need to go on the road to find players, who's available, who's committed elsewhere. This is the whole scope of things and like kind of put it all together. So long story short, now that we have that process up and rolling, it's a heck of a lot easier to, feel like we're not just like late to the offer game and like we are one of the first teams to offer a kid and have the chance to build a relationship with them.
Well, I want to ask an offensive line question, but first we have to pay some bills. So this offensive line segment is going to be brought to you by Turtles Brew. 0 sugar, 0 carbs, gluten-free, bourbon-infused sweet teas with 6% ABV. Some wonderful flavors: lemonade tea, strawberry mint, cherry lime, raspberry peach, and orange vanilla. You can get Turtles Brew in over 100 locations in Ohio. Visit turtlesbrew.com for more information and locations. Portions of the proceeds, of course, go to saving the sea turtles, and be sure to grab their new pouches that they are offering. They are wonderful and a perfect drink any time of year, but especially as we are warming up in the summer. Offensive line, to me, as a very, very novice, someone who only has access to huddle film, who does nerd out, like you said, with the combine and the draft and stuff like that, is still the hardest thing to evaluate. I think partly because a high school team can be running the triple option because that's the best way for them to win, but you guys are looking at it from how does this player fit a wide zone scheme. Take us inside the recruiting side of it, and then how that merges with Coach Cardwell, because I think that is the hardest position for me to look at and be like, oh yeah, I can totally see how this guy would fit or wouldn't fit. I'm just looking at like length, height, movement, the very, very basic stuff. But how do you guys factor all that stuff in when you look at a player and you're like, this kid is doing nothing that we would ask him to do, but we still see that he can help us?
Yeah. In the end, I mean, it goes back to what you said, like the length, the movement, all those traits. If they match up with what like we identify as the critical factors and the traits that we look for that make up a good offensive lineman, regardless of the scheme they play, that concoction of traits will still be what they are. He still has those traits. He'll just have to learn. The curve will be harder for a guy like that. Offensive line, like you said, is unique and specific. So we'll lean on Coach Cardwell and Seth Price, who does a tremendous job as our offensive line quality control coach, with certain questions like, hey, the way he's stepping here, like in your experience, is he able to like get out of that habit in shorter than like 3 years to like make himself into what we need to be? Like ultimately, like we're on a time clock here. Like the kid can't be so developmental, right? But ultimately it comes down to the traits. So like, and then like, I actually like recruiting offensive linemen the most and evaluating them the most, just because like I do think in such a developmental position, it's so easy to tell on the other ones whether a guy can really play, right? But like in an offensive line, you get down to like the body dynamics of a player, and like they might be so off from being a good football player, but they have all the tools, they can get there. In that lens, I'm talking about a guy where like, all right, I'm walking behind him in the hallway. His feet are pointing the right direction. His knees are correct. He's not knock-kneed. And he doesn't have fat knees. He's got like ankles, calves. And then like when we do the bend and flexibility test with him, he knocks it out of the park. And then the length is, we are looking for guys with really good length, like wingspan being 5 or 6 inches more than their height, long arms. Unless the kid has really, really good height, then the wingspan doesn't have to be so far, whatever. But so like we're looking for all that different stuff. And then on top of it, if he has the right mentality, that to me unlocks the key to offensive line play. Like it is such a hard position. They're in the dang war down there in the muck, and they have to fight all game. You have to have the right mentality. You have to be tough. That's a huge part of it. And then when it comes down to it, our strategy is to recruit more of them. If it's a position that has the highest washout rate, where guys aren't, turning out to be good football players at the same rate as a receiver does, then you ought to recruit more of them, because we want the ones that end up panning out to be on our team, not go search for them once like the 2 we took didn't pan out. Now, you can break it down in a couple ways too. Like, a kid's really developmental, but they better be able to bend. They better have the length. They better like have the right body physique and like dynamics and all that stuff. Big hands, thick wrists, all that. We also obviously watch the tape. That needs to show the traits where they can be a good player. Like, if they're getting beat, immediately we're trying not to recruit them. Like, if a kid's getting beat consistently on tape, obviously they're never going to show that on the highlights. Always going to be amazing. So with O lineman, that's where the game tape is good. If he's a productive O lineman on tape and he's consistently playing with good pad level, winning at the point of attack, in good body position, his feet move at the right pace, he has good bend, plays with a base, is in balance, is off the ground, all that. And he tries to finish through the whistle. He doesn't have to necessarily have elite length and elite raw movement traits and all that other stuff, because especially relative to the competition in high school, if it's terrible competition, you grade it on a different scale, right? But if he's that productive in high school, he's already starting to get there as an offensive lineman. Now, if he has to do that against Power 5 competition, so if that kid is 5'11", doing all that stuff, I'm sorry, bro, but Jake Wheelock, for example, we thought his tape was extremely consistent and showed all those kinds of things, and he's 6'3", so it's not like he's a dimensionally a monster, but all that other stuff kind of added up for us. And then you put on top of it the mentality, the toughness. You see him work out in person, that all helps. So it's it's kind of a vast, influx of things we all look for to kind of to put into the equation to what comes out. But the basic traits we're looking for of length, foot fire, ability to bend, ability to get yourself in body control. Do you have functional strength where the player's being impacted when you're hitting them? Are you staying off the ground? And do you show the ability to try to finish people? If you have all those and you're in a triple option offense, we're going to be able to see a lot of those things, but we're not going to be able to know if you can pass pro. So we'll make you send us videos of yourself pass pro. And it's probably not going to look great because you're not getting coached to do it. But more often than not, those kids that just are good athletes and big and have balance and like to hit people and like to play through the whistle, they can develop into offensive linemen. Where teams go wrong is they watch 5 plays of a highlight and the kid buries a few guys, and then they come on campus and their knees are touching when they walk. That kid won't develop. It's not possible for him to develop. So you can't recruit him. To me, offensive line is pretty cut and dry. And those does his body physiologically lend himself to development? And I think of it this way: I am going to sign that player and give him to Nico. What's Nico going to think about this kid? At that point, he's going to. I don't care what he did in high school. He can't squat down without his ankles or his heels coming off the ground. That stuff all plays into it. And if you are deficient in one of the ways that you must be developed, you better be unbelievable in some other way, or else you're not going to get recruited by us.
Regardless of position, when you're looking at, the top 250 ranked players, whether it's by 247 on 3 rivals, anybody, when you're watching that film and you look at them and you're like, I don't know what they're seeing here in terms of ranking him so high. He might be a talented guy, but just such a high ranking. Is there a common theme that you kind of see these ranking services missing? Is there a blind spot that you see?
Yeah. First of all, like right hand to God, I can promise you I have never gone through the rankings. like down through the list to try to find like players. Never. Because the what we do is we are evaluating them through the fall. That doesn't mean, and the rankings like typically are either like not done or most of the kids aren't ranked. Like I'm sure there are rankings for that class, like the 26 class. I know there's rankings for them, but they've ranked like a very small percentage of the country at that point, not the ones we're evaluating. Okay. And that's not to say we're if we don't watch a kid in the fall, we can't watch them in the spring. Like there's guys that don't get on the radar yet till the spring, but they're going to still go through the same process where we're cutting up their games and we're watching them, you know, and likely if they just got onto our radar, they're not on the recruiting services radar yet, you know? So like the way I think about it is like, we're like, let's take you down a little imaginary road here. I'm trying to come up with an analogy. Like if you're building like the roof of a house, like, I don't know if this is even going to make sense, but like we're building that thing in the fall or whenever we're watching the tape, and we're evaluating every other piece of him too. Like we're going through his Twitter, we're getting body type pictures, we're having him send us body type pictures, like lower body specifically. Like, how do you look? How are you going to be able to be developed? Are you built the right way? And then we're watching the tape, making an evaluation on him. And we can give him whatever like number grade in our system we want. Ultimately, obviously, comes down to like binary. Do we want him or not? You know, so like then we'll go from there. By the time we're recruiting these kids for months, most of them aren't ranked. So like, I don't care what they end up getting ranked when they get ranked. Like it's but like to answer, so like going back to the analogy, like we've built that thing throughout whenever we've evaluated them. Okay. Now imagine like an independent service comes in to say how good your roof is, but they like specialize in like talking to other roof builders, and the other roof builders are lobbying to get their roofs rated higher. And then like, okay, well, they just give a rating on the roof. But like, okay, well, this thing was built. This is what it is. Like, that's a terrible analogy. I don't know where I was going with it. But anyway, like in the end, we've done that, or like we've made the evaluation of the kids. Now, so when I go, well, I guess theoretically, like, yeah, but we'll see a guy that we've evaluated get ranked like high during the spring or something. And we're like, all right, well, he got ranked high. Let's look back. What was our grade? Because like obviously the guys we're really recruiting, we're going to know where they get ranked because it drives who recruits them around the country.
Yeah.
We would rather them not be ranked high, so we don't have to compete against other schools who are just going to look at that. And if I have a reporter come to me about a player to rank them high, they won't rank them high. I can promise you that. But we'll go back and look, and like that was our evaluation. And that evaluation was as unbiased as possible. Because that kid was a Twitter egg on 247. Like he didn't have a profile, most likely. So like we're not going off of a ranking clearly in that evaluation. So the biggest thing, honestly, for that top 200 list or whatever is probably the teams recruiting them. You know, like there's no one way that I think the recruiting services get it wrong. Like I think the recruiting services do a really good job of ranking the players. Like I know a lot of those people that do it, and obviously I have a ton of respect for y'all and you work in that industry, but like for the most part, they do a really good job. They're getting it right, but they're going off of who Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State are recruiting. That's how they make their rankings for the most part. And then like when you get into like the ranking that most of the players that we are recruiting, like there's no difference between somebody ranked at the top or the bottom of our class. And that's, to me, that's the reality of it, because typically from like doing this for a while and being around it and being around other people, like the way you get a kid ranked a little higher than he was is to ask for it, or to pay the recruiting service to rank them higher, or let them come to your facility and schmooze them. And then when you need a favor, they're going to rank them. I don't see the value in having a kid get ranked high artificially. If they want to rank a player high, please do it. Our players that we're recruiting, I think, are really good. They deserve to get ranked high. But it does us no favors to have them ranked high, especially in the NIL. It's just going to make them think that they are better than they are. It's going to make them think that they deserve more. And it's going to make us have to compete with other schools who want to get kids that are ranked high. There is an incentive for coaches to get guys ranked high. It makes the fan base think that they're doing a better job in recruiting, and it makes them, a better chance of either keeping their jobs or getting to the next one, right? And it probably would do me a lot of good to have our classes be ranked high. Like I said, I want to be judged on how we do on the field. And I can say that with a clear heart and mind, even after going 3-9 last year. That's how I want to be judged. I don't care about the recruiting rankings. If we have the number one class in the country and then we go crap the bed, that class wasn't the number one class in the country. There was a recruiting class we had at Western Kentucky in 2018. It was the best recruiting class in the program history. And it was so far and away the worst recruiting class I've ever had. And so I hate to just go on and on about it, but it's just so far from what our process is. It has nothing, it equates in no way to whether we are going to recruit a kid or not. So on the one hand, I love the fact that there's passion about it. And I do not think the recruiting side of college football would have so many people, jobs. My job might not exist if 247 didn't explode the recruiting landscape with what y'all have done in the past 20 years with it, right? So I'm fortunate for that, but it just doesn't equate to how we decide whether we like a player or not. So in the end, rank them low and then let's go, let's roll, But the last point I'll make is I do think there's I know Bud Elliott. If he was listening to that, I know what he would say to me. Yes, there's a clear correlation between winning the national championship and signing blue chip, the blue chip ratio. Got it. We need to get to the point where we are competing at the next step, and then we'll get those players, and then we'll go fight for the blue chip ratio because they're going to rank the players we recruit high. Then we'll have the blue chip ratio and go get it. So we got to take one step at a time. We'll win a lot here by recruiting really good players, regardless of what their ranking is, because they're not getting ranked high just because Cincinnati is recruiting them right now. That's just not the reality. When I was at Ohio State, there was a certain corner we recruited that Cincinnati had committed, and then we flipped the day we offered him, and then he ended up being the number one corner in the country. But he wasn't. He ended it number one corner in the country. Was he the number one corner in the country until Ohio State came in? No. So for me, recruit the best players we possibly can. None of that stuff matters. Have them play well, win a lot of games, and then once we've won a lot and we're the big dogs, they'll rank the guys high just because of us recruiting. That's my goal and dream and vision.
So you guys obviously have positional boards for players. Do you have an overall big board as well, where you have this player is he's our number one target regardless of position?
No, we don't. Like, you could make that, and it probably comes down to a couple guys based on who's at the top of their position and what positions are important,
Right.
But we'll just do it by position, knowing that we're trying to sign X amount of guys per position.
Sure.
And then ultimately,
I would love to see your guys' board compared to what 24/7 has your class.
yeah, I know.
From top, to see like 24/7 says this player was number one, but they actually had this guy number one. I that would be interesting to, obviously not sharing that out or anything, but just it'd be interesting to compare the two and see how close they actually were.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There are some guys that, like, we're aware of what they're ranked because it like when Danny James last year got ranked as a 4-star midseason, we're like, come on, like, and we were like, Danny, that's great, congratulations. How you played last week didn't show you as a 4-star, but your whole body of work, I think you should be a 4-star because that's why we're recruiting you, right? But so right now we're aware of like what guys are ranked, and we're also aware of the ones that like don't even have profiles or ranked or what, like, and it doesn't matter. It just like that guides their recruiting process a little bit. They start to think of them more as, well, now I got to go take all these visits because I'm ranked high. It's like, all right, well, do that. Like, we're going to know a guy's probably going to do that based on how they're ranked and like when they get ranked and what articles are written by who at what time about them and who's ranking them and who informed those rankings. Like, it gives us a holistic picture. So to answer your question, like, I'm sure it's a mix. It's probably all over the place. Like, I don't think there's a difference between an 82, 3, or 8. I don't know. Like, maybe I'll be proven wrong in the end, but like,
I mean, that's the thing that I've always kind of, I understand it. Like, fans love it. They want to see how are they ranked, who else is recruiting them, because we don't have anything else to go off of.
Yeah.
But
I do think it matters. Like,
found it funny that, like, how do you differentiate the 350th kid in the class to the 500th kid in the class? Like, you really gonna tell me that, like, in the summer scouting and then the tape that everybody watched, non-coaches, not recruiting people watch, like, you can really put them in that deep of an order from 1 to 1,000 or something like that?
Yeah, I think that's hard to do. Like, I would hate to have that job. It sounds terrible because, like, you also have to consider the feelings of people in my role that care about it. And they're going to bug you about ranking a guy low or this or that. And they think that guy should be ranked higher and they get caught up in it because it helps their career. But, like, the best 2 players we had at Western Kentucky were 2 stars, Malachi Corley and D'Angelo Malone. And to my knowledge, I don't even think they had profiles till we signed them. Like, so like what I grew up in doesn't have anything to do with it. So, and those guys got drafted in the 3rd round from the Group of 5 conference that was 13 out of 14 budget in the conference. Like,
did you see the Athletic article where your 2020 class was like the 16th, like going back, it's the 16th ranked class nationally. UC's was 17th actually. Western was 1.
Oh, I didn't see that. That's awesome. Yeah,
yeah.
It's funny because that class, I think we signed 0 high school kids the whole year because we could only sign 25, and maybe it's a different class.
Whatever class was Malachi's class. He was like the main.
I didn't read that. That's cool. Yeah, but either way, like, I think it's a production business in 247. Like, it's a media company. They want to sell like their subscriptions, and it's their job to make money and support the fans. And it's amazing that it exists. Like, if I was a fan, I'd be all over it. Like, now their number one goal is to make sure like the top 100 players in the country are right. Or like the ones that get drafted. They want the 5 stars to be the ones that get drafted. Like, that's what they always talk about in the draft and all that stuff. It ain't like what the 2000th ranked player is versus the 1500th or whatever, like 1000, you know what I mean? Like that stuff probably matters less to their bottom line. And they probably spend a little less time because typically those kids aren't going to the camps that they're evaluating kids on. And they probably put a little too much focus on the camps. And then 247's been open about their philosophy is like, we're trying to like predict the top draft picks in the NFL from that high school class, right? Ultimately, like that's going to be a byproduct of how they play in college. But, Ivan Pace went undrafted and he was like an incredible college football player. So like we in the end will get judged on how they play in college. More often than not, how they play in college will be indicative of how they get drafted. But like there's certain things. So like, I don't know, we're just dealing on different wavelengths. But if it was part of the process we go through, it would concern me. But since it isn't, like, see how these kids play when we get them, and I think the fans will be happy with the recruits that we sign, regardless of what they're ranked. Like, I don't know what Jaquan Sanks was ranked. I hope it was high. He deserves to get ranked high. He has balled out so far for us right away. Same with like Simeon Coleman and some other guys that have played really well early on. And like, we obviously have done studies like when it's a dead period or they're not playing high school football. Like in August, we do a ton of studies. Like this last couple of weeks in May, we did a variety of, research projects just to try to see what we need to do, what we need to tweak in our process to like make it better. So like we went through and looked at all the Big 12 first team all conference players of the new Big 12 teams. So like if they're an all conference player at Utah in the Pac-12, they're on this list too. Same with the draft picks over the last 5 years. And like, I think the all conference players, first team all conference the last 5 years, and like, where are they from? What was their size? Is there like a underclassmen report video of them? And then like, we can try to get a catalog of like what they looked like in that. And you kind of like want to go back through and watch each of those positions. So like, what were they in high school? These are the ones that panned out from our conference and our current competition. And what do they look like? And so like we do all that and like we'll add their like recruiting ranking and stuff, and probably gonna mess the numbers up. I don't have off the top of my head, but like I think it was like 97 of the players were 3 stars. And like 20 of them were 4 or 5 stars, and then like 25 or 30 of them were 2 stars or unranked. It's like, well, there's more kids that weren't even like didn't have a profile and were 4 or 5 stars. And this is our competition. So like now obviously like we didn't go deep enough to know like, well, this was the amount of 4 and 5 stars. So like that number is better. And you know how like it's relative to the statistics.
Way more 3 stars than 5 stars.
Yeah.
Just in
Yeah. So like
general.
the numbers should be that way, but like, and I think in this conference, historically, if you go through each team's top recruits of their history, more often than not, the top recruits in their history, certainly we've looked through ours. It's not 100%, but it didn't pan out to be that recruiting ranking, So, I mean, what the last thing we're going to do is just try to add a guy that's a 4-star at the end just because he's a 4-star and raise a recruiting ranking. Like, that there's a reason that kid was ranked. If they're ranked high and they're not getting taken by anybody and passed over by teams, including us, like if they're ranked high and we're not recruiting them, it means we didn't recruit them for a reason. If we're not recruiting, like put it this way too, another example. If we decide to not recruit a kid based on what we see through his season, and he gets ranked like really high in the spring, unless there's some information that we don't know about, it's not just going to make us recruit him. You know what I mean? Like or if we ranked a kid really high based on what, or rated him high based on what we saw in the season, and they make him low, we're just going to celebrate that. What I find interesting is when like they change the rankings or something in the spring. I don't know. In the end, it has to go back to tape. And if the tape looks like how it does, that didn't change in the spring. The tape was still the tape back then. They can go to camps. We're going to watch all those camps, make sure they're moving the right way. Yes or no. How do they move? Have they gotten better? Have they grown, et cetera, et cetera? And then we'll go back and watch the tape again and see. And certainly there's some guys that we've brought in on official visits that, or bringing in, that have raised their stock based on the tape we've seen, but we haven't seen 247 change their stuff. So, yeah.
Kind of shifting gears because I'm curious. You brought up Ivan Pace and watching film. I know you're super busy, and I don't know if you've gotten a chance to do it, but when you came in to Cincinnati and took over the job as GM, if you got the chance to kind of look back over that 2021 team and the film that they put up as a talent evaluator, who and on that team just really, really hopped off the page as Sauce first and foremost. But with Sauce, and then, you know, who else?
Yeah, that's the obvious one. You know, Kobe Bryant was a really good player too. You know, that seems obvious as well. It's pretty much all the same guys that have gone on to be like really good players in the NFL. I don't know if, like, you know, I've always thought Josh Wiley was a really good player. Same with Alec Pierce. You know, I've more watched their team as a whole. Like, what did this team physically look like as a whole? And, you know, where did they come from? How did they get there? You know, obviously that's such a high standard of success. We're trying to replicate it. So like, how do we get that? You know? I mean, there's so many good players like that. You know, I thought the defensive end, Sanders, was a tremendous football player. Kind of reminded me of the guy we had at Western, D'Angelo Malone, and, you know, elite pass rusher. You know, obviously it's a number of guys. There's just so many good players, but yeah, I didn't really look at like studying them relative to each other. Like,
Yeah,
you know, you got the receipt, like Trey Tucker and Tyler Scott were dynamic, you know, really good players. It could just go down the list of the NFL guys, you know.
I
I'd be
like all
lying
the
if I
guys
was
that got drafted.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just giving a cop-out answer. I wish I had more. Like, I wish I had a guy I love that didn't. Like, I thought I forget what his name is. There was a D lineman from Hoban who was a little shorter, but like a really good football player, and he played his butt off.
Deshaun Martin, I think.
Maybe, yeah. I'm screwing it up. I don't want to just like talk when I don't even know what I'm talking about here, but yeah.
No, that's all right. Well, you've given us 2 hours of your time. I'm sure your wife is annoyed by that. So
She's
I have a quick
sick of
question.
hearing me talk, that's for sure.
I have a quick question I wanted to get in. Just with all of the news of the NCAA college football game coming out,
Yeah.
were you asked for any of the ratings in regards to any of that? Were you involved in any, like, consulted in any type of way? Are you anticipating what the ratings are going to be, or has it affected any of the recruiting process? As kids, I would imagine, are probably curious as to what type of involvement that's going to have.
Yeah, they haven't consulted me. I'd be shocked if they would. Just, yeah, I don't know. No, they never have. I was joking with Jack Griffith about it because, like, as we've talked about, he is in charge of like scouting the whole country. So he's like, they better like us. Like, we should just have Jack actually make like the ratings for the whole country. I think that would be productive. But no.
Well, we found out today that you're not going to be able to alter the ratings of any player on the game.
You can't like go in like the old days and like read. You do upload.
Yeah, I think it's all because of NIL and all of that. That was one of the things that came out in the information dump today, that you're not going to be able to go in and tweak anybody's ratings, which, whatever.
That's annoying. It also, because I would love to just create a player, but yeah.
Well, you can. That's a whole different mode, though.
Okay, perfect. But no, it matters. It hasn't had an effect relative to competition yet in recruiting. Like these kids like trends and stuff. So like if there's cool stuff about a specific team and the game implements it like in an extremely positive manner, like, and they're seeing it more like subliminally, the kids probably are gonna like gravitate towards it. But I'm really just hoping those high school kids play it like as much as I did. Like, I just like, I'd like to think they love football enough that they're going to be on that thing all the time. Now all of them are like, yeah, I can't wait to play with myself. Like, it'll be cool. Like all this and that. Like, I obviously didn't play football, so maybe that's why. Maybe I spent too much time like on the game and trying to build like a empire in recruiting on it. But like, I think it's awesome. Like, I can see why they aren't letting you change ratings, I guess, because of NIL stuff and all that. It's got to be a tricky toe to line or line to toe, but like, yeah, no involvement in the ratings. It's gonna be. I'd hate to be a guy that gets rated like incorrectly low. Are they gonna change it during the season based on how these guys play?
I don't know. They haven't released any information in regards to that, and I wonder how much they're literally, because there's 13,000 kids or something like that they have to evaluate. I wonder how much they're. Well, I wonder how much they're leaning on PFF or something like that in regards to those ratings. But
yeah, I mean, PFF probably tried to make a partnership with them or something. Like, I'm sure there'll be something related to that. It'll be production based and based on stats, and I don't know. I'm suspecting the guys that like haven't, that like, I don't know. There's probably going to be a bunch of guys that like we're much higher on because we have like stuff we've only seen, right? That aren't going to be ranked higher. We're like what?
Do you guys use PFF?
Fair enough.
Yeah, we use PFF all the time. I don't think we could like function without it. But the way we use it is to use it for the film.
Right.
Like, the best thing about PFF is that you're able to watch every single play of every single game at any moment. It's like amazing. Now the grades themselves, like, we don't put a whole lot of stock in.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. I mean, I had someone that worked for PFF that said the quarterbacks are pretty good, but outside of that, it's not. I mean, their bread and butter is the NFL.
Yeah.
Looking at college guys' grades, who in the hierarchy of everybody doing grading that works for PFF, the newest guys are probably the ones doing the college grading. So who's actually doing the grading is
a great point.
Question. So
yeah, I didn't even ever think of it like that. Like, yeah, because with the NFL, they obviously want that to be as correct as possible. We'll go through lists on PFF all the time. Like, it's like, all right, well, let's pull up like who the top like freshman
great
like corner on coverage
database.
is, But yeah, we use it as that. But like, I think the big factor on why like we can't just go by grades, we still have to go by traits and like how and why they're going to be a good player for us is because we're still predicting them into the future. Like, the grades are largely like assignment and production based, which is great. But if it's like a 6-foot nose that can't do a whole lot and doesn't have like the high end traits that we need to be productive at our level, they can be graded out high on PFF, but they're not necessarily going to be high like when they face that better competition. So like it's not predictive is what I'm trying to say, which is the beauty and the best thing about our deal is that we're trying to be predictive and trying to make sure in the future this guy's going to play good for us,
Kind of touching back on the game, whenever the recruiting like stuff came up on the game, I always just simmed it or like never worried about it. Were you one of the people that like, you did every little notch exactly how you wanted it to make sure you got as many recruits as possible?
You work in the recruiting.
I haven't played it in 10 years. I'm saying when you were
I guess gosh, I'm getting old because like when that game was out, you were probably like 8 years old.
Yeah, he was like 9 years old in 2000.
You've got to be kidding.
Well, I'll blow
This
all your
guy's
minds.
still
I've never played the game ever.
Gosh, you're ridiculous.
Yeah, as you can probably imagine, I was a crazy person on that video game. Like I had an online dynasty with like my cousin through high school, and then like when we got to college, like
Still play.
yeah, I got rid of my system. The one big thing is like playing the game with the recruits is going to end up being a big thing, which will be fun.
Yeah.
So hopefully I can expense that to Cincinnati and get one of these things. But no, in all seriousness, Keegan, yeah, like that stuff was dialed. And I don't know if they're going to keep this or delete this from the game, but like I got really, really competitive with it. And I would, in like the dynasty we had with the roommates and stuff, I would, can't believe I'm admitting this, I would go to the next week to see which like players were uncovered, because like the scouting aspect of it, I can't remember exactly what it was, but then once I found out like who was good, who was the underrated player, I would then turn it off and then go back and recruit that guy. Like, so my rate of like the underrated dudes becoming gems was so high, and I would just be killing. Like, hey, it's an uneven game, man. You got to find your deal. So sorry, Danny and Mike.
It's just like now you have the big NIL, you got a small NIL, like
yeah. Hey, I had to assume the other people were doing it.
You tampered in NCAA football 14.
Yeah. Come on now.
They did announce today that they're not going to actually have NIL in the dynasty portion of it. I think it's going to be involved somehow in Road to Glory, but they were worried about incorporating it, and with everything changing week to week, month to month, they were worried about screwing it up and having something implemented that changed as soon as they implemented it. So
yeah, that's got to be a pain because they'd have to just redo the whole thing.
Can you build like a Cincinnati 2025 recruiting class team where all those guys are on the same team and they play like Alabama or something while they're on their official visit?
Well, yeah. So obviously,
I guess it's not out yet, right? I don't know anything about this stuff. So
like we would have, but like I'm gonna Jack, if he's listening to this. Can't believe you made it 2 hours and 20 minutes, Jack. But if you did, when he was at Villanova, and he'll kill me for saying this, but when he was at Villanova, I think I'm getting the story right, but like basically created every player that was coming on the visit, like their uniforms that they wore in high school, their height, weight, everything, put them on. Like he had to make Villanova's team, I think, because they didn't have FCS too, and did all of that and then put those players in the game and then on the official visit played with them. So like somebody that is willing to do that is also the guy that's watching every single player in the country. So like that kind of shows you what type of dude that is. But yeah,
not to rain on that parade, but you're not.
There will be a BCJ dynasty that you're more than welcome to join. With fans. Staff and fans.
Yeah, the fans would kill me at this point because in the end it comes down to gameplay, and I haven't played a video game in like a minute.
Can I be the commissioner of this league since I don't play? I'll just make arbitrary rulings against teams and suspend coaches and whatnot.
I'd put Aaron in charge. He would probably love if you were the commissioner,
especially with a baby due in a week.
Not me. It's you, buddy.
Please let Zach go.
I love it, guys. Thank you for having me. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
You got any more? Any more questions?
I'm good, man. Looking
Sorry
forward
for
to
keeping
seeing
you
what
guys
you guys cook up over these next 3 weeks. Should be, as you said, should be busy time. Hopefully, a lot of commitments come out of it.
Yeah, me too. I'm fired up about it. Really excited about, the guys we're getting on campus, and like proud of really the work that we've done to get them here and the relationships we've built with them. So, I mean, it's really exciting times. So, as weird as it is, a lot of people aren't paying attention. Obviously, the fans listening to this 2 hours in are, but like around the world, they're not paying attention to college football in June. But this is when the rosters get made. So it's really exciting. Fired up about it.
All right, man. Well, we appreciate it as always. I'm sure we'll catch back up at some point soon. See you out at Higher Ground, or have you on again. Down the road. So,
Of course. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks
Thanks
Zach.
for the work you do.
well, Keegan does a lot of the work. I just jump on a podcast every Wednesday night. So,
Oh, that's even better. You've figured it out then.
exactly. Send out a couple tweets and talk for a couple hours a week. That works for me.
I love it. Take it easy, guys.
All right,
Yeah.
thanks, Zach. And that was Cincinnati General Manager Zach Grant, gracious enough with his time to fill everybody in on the transfer portal additions from the spring and talk some recruiting and high school recruiting, some 2025 visits that are about to start, and obviously Keegan will have the details on all of that as it becomes more and more official and info starts to trickle in. But Keegan, I got to be honest, I don't have a ton more to go over tonight. Do you have anything you feel is very important that we need to talk about?
I'm not sure what Chad wants to do in terms of talking about Wes's press conference today. If he wants to say
Do it in the nightcap. We'll
Okay.
talk about talk in the nightcap.
Okay. Then I'm good.
Chad will listen to you talk about someone else talking in the nightcap.
I might be able to do it. I just didn't want to commit to like 2 hours. Like plus this would have gone 3 hours if I was
Yeah.
also like
Yeah.
chiming in with questions. So, I sat and watched, and you guys did a phenomenal job. And Zach is always like, look, I will say this. There is not another team site in the country that has the GM director of recruiting come on and shoot the shit for 2 hours. That does not happen anywhere.
Be
Like,
very
I mean-
transparent too.
We had him on the 513 day. We had him
Yeah.
today. We had him after
signing day.
2 days after signing day in December. So we've had him on 3 times in essentially 5-6 months. So that type of and that's the type of stuff that we are massively appreciative of.
And he
So
loves doing it. So we'll keep having him on. As long as,
well, yeah, he wouldn't. I don't think he would keep doing it if it wasn't enjoyable to him. He's got clearly they have enough tape to go over. So
So, look, thanks again to Zach. We'll hit on Buckley and Wes at the podium today on the nightcap. So
Okay.
we'll see.
Shot
everybody else.
doctor. Shot doctor. Good. But tune into that with, I guess, Chad, Keegan, maybe Aaron, everybody but me, possibly. That's for sure. Thanks again to Zach for joining us. And we will talk to everybody again next week, Wednesday night. Hopefully we have some commits to discuss on the next episode of the BCJ podcast, presented, as always, by our wonderful sponsor, the Holy Grail.